This is going to be not only another, but the second ever episode of Hot Take Point Made League of Legends edition. Obviously in CS, we've done a million of them. It's actually, if people don't know, probably my most popular show in Counter-Strike. But the thing is, and as you'll see on this particular show, it all depends how often people can either not only meet, but if they have hot takes, there's no point doing an episode if no one really has one and you're just like crowbarring one like mid-ass take into the episode. So we also, in that show, we tend to usually, like in Counter-Strike, wait till there's a big event or something, or like a load of roster moves, for example. So I'm just saying that now on the League edition, because even though on League, when the seasons are running, we actually in theory could create more hot takes because there's so many different leagues going on and we all watch them. But I'm just anticipating when it comes to the off season, unless people can come up with really good historical takes, we might have to have a few weeks off that or a month or two off. It depends. Wait until the roster mania begins or something. Anyway, one thing I didn't do on the last one is, one, you will notice a Tantalus who makes the overlays for our stuff because he's really quick and he's really good. He did do an interesting angle where for the CS one, unsurprisingly, the image in the middle of the Hot Take Point Made logo is a Molotov cocktail because that's obviously a piece of utility in Counter-Strike. He's done the Ignite here for the League of Legends one, which also, he doesn't know this, but low-key works for me because I am the only person who was like, I don't even care if TP meta is OP. Flame should only ever use Ignite in lane because it's just about Flame's lane. Who cares about the rest of the map? Screw Helios and all those other players who used to play in the rest of the lanes. Before Lost Boy just got poached to NA by Loco to beat me in a bet that definitely wasn't made at the beginning, but I honour my bet. So anyway, I also didn't on the last one explain, because I did that whole thing about Keire. I actually didn't explain who Zaboutine is. Zaboutine actually has been a coach for many, many years. He coached most famously in the LCS teams like Optic, Immortals. But also, if you don't know, basically, you know now how everyone understands there are ERLs and there are different leagues that have the different casters. You probably know from way back in the day, Chips and Noy on the French cast, and maybe you know now about the LFL, but what you probably don't know is Zaboutine the whole time has been commentating and doing analysis and doing talk shows, including with people like Law, on that OTP network for years at this point now. Like, if you've ever seen on his Twitter, he actually has the pinned tweet is him doing an actual good, I know a little bit of French, an actual good rap God one. Not the one where they go, oh my God, Dracos and Medic are just saying words really fast. He actually did a good one where it was like casting and he rap God in it and did all the abilities. So he actually does have his own basis in League as well. He's not just a guy, he's not also from our Discord or whatever. So welcome everyone. Obviously also, as I pointed out on the last episode, I did this on my stream as well, I have kind of like archetypally matched people. So as I said, Keire is here because he's sort of allowed to be unleashed, isn't he? He's a fan, he can be unhinged. Zaboutine's here to sort of be like, well, that's, you know, I don't know if I can go that far, but within the bounds of the game, here's what he has to put a bit more of the professional sheen on it. So with all that said, who has the opening hot take? So I've got a banger, but I like to start, warm up to it. So who's got a hot take to start us off here, gentlemen?
I'll go first.
Go on then.
Because I've got one. Cause I despise this talking point. And it was, they're not their fault, right? Okay. But they were like they're the starters of it, right? Okay. And it was it was LS and Kedro and all the people yapping about fucking Fearless Draft and selling Fearless Draft, right? I'm going to break it something. Fearless Draft is a steaming pile of fucking dog shit. Do you want to know why I won't? No, because I had to watch it in LDL now for I think 2 years, and I've now had to watch it in LPL for like the first split section. And if you've not watched those sections, just go and watch them. It's fucking terrible. Nobody would want to put themselves through it because it doesn't actually fix the thing you think is a problem. Like everyone like talks about it in terms of like, oh, it creates champion diversity. Does it fuck? Basically, one person plays the matchup and then the other person plays the exact same OP thing, and then just the other matchup, and then even if, because usually BO3, if it is a third game, then you might see interesting picks, but not that interesting because they usually just move on to draft B of what would be a BO5, and they do that there. And so you only, like, the only way you ever actually see Fearless Draft get anywhere near interesting is if you go to like game 4 and game 5 of like a end of like series. And that's like basically like that's the implementation that was like provided the most. But you already have like really, really like good like draft implementation. Like go look at like the LCK, Keire right now, famous for his rigidity, is now playing the Garen Nasus in terms of like counter solving each other. You have changes in the ADC metas. You have like a top lane counter pick being utilised like heavily, very effectively all the time. And then here's the ultimate cracker. I want to see the best players in the world playing what they're best at. I don't fucking care if Chovy's forced to play Soraka mid. I don't want to watch that. I want to watch Chovy bang cunts day in and day out on Corki and Tristana, like shooting fucking people's heads off me. I don't want to see fucking that nonsense. What are we watching for? Like, what are we watching for? This is so stupid. It's unbelievably, like, oh.
He started off on a hot one. Fair enough. Okay, go. What do you think, Zaboutine?
I can't. The problem is, I agree. I think it's horseshit. I think FAKER'S draft is horseshit. I feel like it's one of the. I want to think I'm clever because I don't understand the problem type of solution. I think that's the League of Legends, draft plays such a key role in the game. Everybody understands that. I think this is why so many people that do not understand the game comes with draft, because that's the only layer of analysis they do understand. That's how predominant, right, draft is in League of Legends. And if you think about it, right, the most important thing in draft is having space for expression, right? I think that everybody understands that with the current system of draft, there is a lack of player expression because everybody's condemned to play the very first few picks that take over the meta, right? That's everybody says that. And then what we're going to do to fix that is remove even more expression by just banning things that were successful for teams to make sure there will never be a run it back scenario, which is one of the most exciting thing ever in a series, right? It's like, oh, we played draft 1 and there is like a Baron steal. And they're like, guys, we'll run it back. It was just a Baron steal. And if they come back, it was, oh yeah, their counter draft was actually good. They just failed to execute. Or if they lose and they're 0-2 and they have shown like nothing pretty much. And so you start in game 3 and you're like, what do they have right back in the shop, right? To actually come back in this series. With that, this is a layer that's completely removed from LoL esport. That's great. And the core problem is just tremendous lack of bans, because bans should be a percentage coverage of the whole roster in a way that, if you have a normal distribution of power among the champions, in any statistic, operation, you would cut the tail ends, which is like the lower part and the higher part. So the lower part doesn't interest us because in this case, we want the best champions. But if you can cover enough of these top champions, then you have a lot of champions that have like defined strength and weaknesses, and matchups actually exist because there is not like one champion that covers all the matchups that you can just blind. And so red side surprisingly becomes way more stronger if you have less champions available, because champions have like blind sides, and that's kind of like the point of a MOBA. But instead of like, and that's why I'm so upset with this situation, is like Riot does understand the lack of expression and like, oh, you know what? We're just going to remove even more expression, and then you're going to be forced to play what you're not comfortable with. And your opponents who do know that the champion you picked in game 1 were very strong, they're going to get it. So you're going to get the B draft or the flip draft, as Keire said, against better champions. So we're just going to put people off comfort, and we're going to go to call it like creative, where there is no creativity, because the only reason something's creative, while we are excited about Nasus or Garen mid, is because it's a strategic choice. It's a tactical knowledge of the players that do understand the stake of the matchup and can find a counter pick that the opponent might not know. That's the Garen mid against the Nasus. None of this exists if everybody's forced to play just A and B draft of the current patch. And I think that's really the horseshit solution for something that's very simple. You just make 10 bans in like 30 seconds, and then you play the draft in a way that you have the 10 top champions that are out of picture for your team, and then you start playing the draft normally. But since I don't want to do that, we just have to go with like random ass carousel.
Okay, I do like this take, because I obviously was, even though it's already, I already wasn't a fan of the FAKER'S draft anyway. Like, I'm one of the people where even when it was conceptually presented before it had ever been used, I had like 50 obvious reasons it wouldn't be good. So I'll run through some of them, but I'll try and relate to what I've actually seen of the FAKER'S draft, because they do it in LDL now, if people don't know, not just those exhibition tournaments. So first things first is Keire's angle. The whole reason I watch League of Legends is to watch the best players piloting the champions they're the best on. That's my dream scenario. Like, I'll give you an obvious example that comes to mind very recently if you watch the LPL. If Xiaohu is playing and Lucian is in the meta, I want to see him play it. He might be like the best player ever on that, and he played it top and mid in the past. He's unbelievable. Even when it's an ADC, like, he's always going to be a god on that. You think of like historical examples, Mad Life on Thresh or Blitzcrank. Bro, imagine if in a best of 5 he could only play it once. What the fuck would that be? At the end of the day, here's the flaw I think they're doing with this. The mistake they're making is it's a classic thing a noob will always be find appealing. I can tell you in Counter-Strike, whenever I complain about the format of the major, by the way, it's the same format you're all going to complain about every year at Worlds now. It's that Swiss system where after round one, it's not properly seeded. And so what you get is incredibly unfair matchups, like NRG never has to face an Asian team, but D plus KT has to face every Asian team. Like, those are so inherently unfair that when I argue against it, I've learned what people are saying back to me is they're not arguing my point. That, like in this case, they're not arguing against normal draft. What they're saying, if you boil down what they're saying is, yeah, but I think it will be more novel and exciting for me when random things can happen and matches can be upset and things can happen. So what they're always arguing against in the format is, I think it's exciting when crazy things happen. Now, first of all, that's an incredibly gauche way to enjoy a sport. Like, this isn't a movie that you're putting on as, like, you know, on the background, like, oh, whoa, some crazy shit. Wow, look at the graphics. Like, you are trying to watch a high-level sport where people are professionals and they train and they try to be the best ever and understand the metagame and it has historical epic relevance. So already, that's kind of a bit lowbrow in my opinion. And secondly, if you just admitted, I just like fearless draft because I want any old shit to happen, well, we wouldn't include you in the conversation anymore. We'd go on in a separate room with the whole discussion of like, but is it good for the game? What does it have? So the reason I know this is what people think is, I'll give you a very quick analogy. Years and years ago when the poker boom first happened, I once played with a bunch of people at a Counter-Strike event. And one of the guys who was an owner of a team, obviously had like loads more money than the rest of us, and we were just like 19-year-old kids. So when he was playing, because I guess for him, the buy-in wasn't worth whatever it was, like $5 or whatever, you know. To him, it's like, I give a fuck less if I win $5 or lose $5. So I noticed when we were playing poker, he would just do that shit where he wasn't playing poker, he would just call down every single hand. Like, no matter what you bet, no matter who you is, he would just call it all the way down. And even if at the end he lost, he was like, what do I give a shit? And I said to him, yeah, but you're spoiling the game, mate. Like, in this scenario, what am I playing for fun at this point in time? If I know no matter what, I can never buff you, and you always call it. You know, and I said to him, basically, if you're going to play like that, mate, why even sit here for 3 hours and waste our time? How about this? I'll say however much you've got in your pocket, me and you'll flip a coin for it now. If you lose, get the fuck out and we can play poker. And the joke is, he went, okay then. And I realised, wait a minute, so that's all he ever wanted. He just wanted the thrill. He never cared about poker. So essentially, I would say the same thing about fearless draft. I think in the short term, a lot of fans just think, oh, it'd be so crazy and exciting. And then I'll connect it to a point you'll have all seen that drives me crazy as someone who knows pro players, because they do it in my game, Counter-Strike, as well. It's when the fan on Reddit goes, so you're telling me Scout, one of the best players who's paid to play this game, can't play, insert whatever champion they've decided he should play. And what they're always ignoring, same thing at Counter-Strike, they'll go, what, you can't even play 5 maps? And I always tell them, no, you haven't completed the sentence. Absolutely, Scout can play any champion in the game. You're asking him to play that champion against one of the top 10 players in the whole world and win. Now, notice what a different equation that is. Like, spoiler, that team you're saying can't play the 6th map in Counter-Strike. Oh, they can. Against me and you, they dumpster us, mate. The question is, can they play a top 10 team in the world on that map? No, because that's my point, which is the ultimate point about fearless draft. The reason why even the greatest players in the world, beyond rare exceptions like a Chovy or a Knight, usually can't go 10 champions deep, because there's only so many hours in the day. Like, you know that Lucian I just mentioned about Zhao Hu? He's not really reaching back 3 years to grab that, guys. He must be practicing it now. He has to, even as the greatest now, he has to devote time now in his solo queue practice and scrims to playing some Lucian games to get good on it. So there's only a limited amount of time. If you then make it so you have to play 3 times more champions, we all shit out of luck, mate. It's going to make the level of the game degrade like a motherfucker. And then think about this angle, guys. Think about those scenarios where you all love, like, people who actually cause upsets like Adam. Adam can't exist in the fearless draft, you idiots. His whole shit is picking those 4 champions and knowing the matchup better than everyone else. He's actually, by the way, one of the best examples of why you should want the standard draft, so that then players like, and by the way, it doesn't have to be Adam, Power of Evil, my boy Froggen, these people, fucking Jensen even, he's on about 2.5 champions at this point in time. If you give these guys their classic champion, Jensen and Oriana, he's going to still be able to carry games because he's mastered that and he probably puts his hours in on it. If you make it fearless draft, by the time we're on game 4, some of these series, it's going to be fucking shit. And then the last thing I'll say, 2 quick things. One, another thing that's beautiful if you love laning, and everyone knows I'm a fan of that because some of the players I like, the most beautiful laning performance is when you beat the guy on both sides of the matchup in a series. That's like, what do you want me to say at that point in time? I beat you on the one you thought was stronger. Then I went, you know what, you have that, I'll take it. Oh, I beat you on that too. That's gangster. Well, first of all, you're not going to get that as often in this scenario because the matchups just won't work the same in draft when the other guy can't even threaten to pick that again. And then secondly, This is the last angle I'll say, which is if anyone knows very briefly the concept of the British game Knockout Whist, it's a card game. It's essentially the same as the game Top Trumps, if people know. You have a game where you have cards with different metrics on, and what you do is when it's your turn to pick the trump, or the metric in this case, you say spades or strength or something. And then the idea goes at this, Zaboutine. Because I say strength or spades, I throw a card down, and whoever has the highest spade or strength metric, he wins that round, right? Well, the actual strategy, if people don't know the metagame strategy of that game, isn't just play your strongest card. It's actually that because when I set the trump, you can choose which of your spades to put down. Well, if you have 2 spades, since you know I'm taking spades, I've probably got a high one, right? So what you're going to do first time, Zaboutine, is play your lowest spade because you know I'm probably going to win this hand. Then you're going to try and save your highest spade later, hoping I've used mine. And you get that's all this draft will become, by the way, as well. It won't be what you hope it will be. What's great about standard draft, this is my final point, is this. Actually, unless you're some god-tier Korean team 10 years ago playing a Western team and you want to style on them in game 1, you're picking your best draft in game 1. Then you're adjusting between the games. In the modern Fearless draft, you won't always pick your best draft in game 1 because actually, if you fuck it up and misexecute 1 or 2 of those champions, you can't play them again for the rest of the best of 5. So actually, what it will then become also is some sort of weird compromise on like, right, well, when do I actually put a strong champion out there? When do I gamble? And it won't be in a good way, like I'm doing it because I'm predicting what they're going to do. And lastly, I'll just say this. If you want a really hot take, I'll spin off of that. I'd even argue that beyond noob leagues, where this might be fun, if anything, the more interesting one would be the opposite draft, which would be we decide the draft a week in advance and you have a week to prep those champions. The other angle, actually, sort of like the StarCraft thing of like trying to snipe me. Like, you know already that I picked a weird matchup, but you've got 3 days to prep it. That would actually, I think, be more interesting if you actually like high-level League of Legends. So, yeah, I actually think it's a great point. I agree with it. It's obviously not that hot for us, but I think fans... You're right. I think fans are already in on that idea, man. They, if anything, they want it like implemented worldwide or something wild, right?
Yeah, and the thing is the rumor right now, right, is so the big rumor right now is that the new tournament is possibly going to be Fearless Draft. This new
the international one.
Yeah, this theoretical tournament is possibly going to be Fearless.
The spring one or whatever.
Yeah, I think like that's like the rumor, right? Okay, the ghost, right? First of all, that will completely devalue the tournament because as a novel tournament, I actually think the best concept in League, just a little knockoff of this, would be like generals. Your coach can speak during the game. I think that would be fucking.
That's interesting.
So good.
Yeah.
Right, and then you can record little sound bites of like the coach talking to his players during the game, and that would be like a really interesting, like novel, like tournament and stuff like that. And because you'd have the cross pollination of like what are the Chinese coaches saying versus the LCK coaches, the EU, the NA. That would be like really interesting. I am like so. And I'm watching tier 2 doggers in fucking China, right? These people are terrible. They're literally changing name ID like midweek and stuff. You're never going to know who they are. And I'm not even interested with it there. It's so boring. The last thing I would want is like Knight to be playing less Nico games. Knight, you know what I mean? Fucking Chove to be playing less Azir. Like, who would want that? I don't know, like, people, I don't think folk realising the consequences of what they're going to ask for is what it's going to correlate to. So yeah, that's my one there, boys. Easy done.
I don't think there is ever an occurrence in I mean, Thorin, you've been watching esports for longer than I did, but I don't think ever in any game I've watched lowering the skill or the strategical expression of a player or a team has been something positive eventually for the game. I can't recall a single occurrence of it. Ever. Everything that got narrowed, like side laning got narrowed. By the way,
let me ask you this. Boring. You were someone who worked as a coach, so I'm just speculating as an outsider who knows players, but would you agree with my premise there? The fan, I think, thinks the opposite to me and you, Zaboutine. They think that if you've, like I said about, why don't you practice it if you're a pro? They think if we do Fearless Draft, all the pros will just become good on 50 champions. I actually think they'll become slightly better on the ones they're forced to, but they'll become worse on their mains. Like, would you agree? You'll actually like lower how good people are on their best champions too, right?
I feel like I hope that one day, one content team is going to produce a one day, like real time, to see how narrow, like the time frame you have as a player to hone your own skills.
Yes.
You have so many imperatives, right? And you have screams and feedbacks and discussions. And then I was working in NA, meaning that every single queue time is 20 minutes and you have a Nunu top that play Ghost Cleanse, and you're just losing this game. There is nothing to do, and you tag again, and you listen to music, you play a side game. But I remember Crown looking at me as like losing his mind. I was like, bro, I just want to play the game, you know. So And it's not the only one. Like I can recall plenty of names of players that were like this. So what are you gonna ask? You think you're gonna play like Riven mid? It's gonna be the champions that are the most consistent in the game are gonna be the most represented. So right now we have the ADC meta, but after the layer of the ADC meta, imagine you ban Lucian, Corki, Tristana, and Zeri and so on. It's gonna be Orianna versus Azir, and it's gonna be Azir versus Orianna. And when Orianna and Azir are banned, it's gonna be LeBlanc, and after LeBlanc, it's gonna be maybe Zoe or Victor, because control mages have the least risk for the average reward. So players are just gonna become all BDDs, and you're gonna narrow the quality of a player such as BDD who excels at control mages, because everybody's gonna have to pick them. And it's going to feel very, very dull eventually. There is not a single... The only reason a champion is exciting to be watched is because people picked it. It's because it's a result of a cognitive decision of thinking that the strength of this champion in this specific situation is going to be good for the team. This is skill. And I mean, I've watched a lot of esports, whether it's fighting games. I don't think that narrowing expression is one thing that's like positive for on the long run, and it kind of shows for me a failure on Riot Games side to understand what's at stake with narrowing the amount of analysis desk, analysis, break time, drafts recorded, fearless draft. It's like nobody cares about analysis, nobody cares about strategy. The only thing that people care about is fighting. But the thing is, yes, on the short term, but you're going to see that in 3-4 years, when the game is just going to be like team fighting at Drake's, and none of the picks or the situation are going to be created out of strategy or choices, people are going to be like, yeah, this is basically a TFT with players playing the fights. And it's going to feel very, very bad.
Okay. Right. I will just unleash, just so we can get right into the quality. That was the appetizer. This is the entree. So here's the thing. I'll do it properly. I'll just say the headline. I'll let you react, and then I'll come, as in just initial react. So basically, the headline is, Rookie's career is way more impressive than Faker's, and Faker might never be able to do the things Rookie has done. Now, you might think, what the... So that's the headline, by the way. Rookie's career is way more impressive than Faker's. Because here's why. Because one of the things I really hate, and Keire will have heard me bang on about this 1 million times, but it's because when I learn a concept, I try to integrate and I try to be aware of it myself, always going forward. It's a bit like, you might have seen people like LS, when they learn a logical fallacy, yeah, they never shut the fuck up banging on about it, but that's because they're trying to like level everyone's thinking up and try and make people not fall in certain pitfalls, because it gets annoying when you have the same circular arguments and people make the same points. So one of the things I find really frustrating is when people do what you call single factor analysis. You pick one factor and you just decide, right, whoever's better at that, that's it, that decides the whole thing. So famously, the classic one in esports or sports is rings, championships. So like, you don't actually have an argument of like, well, I think Ronaldo's better than Messi, well, I think Messi's better than Ronaldo. You don't like talk about how they play football or what they did for their teams or what their roles were. What you do is you just go, well, one has a World Cup, or you go, well, the other one has more Champions Leagues, or you go, well, look who has the most Ballon d'Or. And what you're doing by doing that is you're actually not having the discussion. You're just proxying it to one factor, and then you're just saying essentially higher number wins, which isn't analysis. It's not even a discussion. So the reason why I say that Rookie has had a way more impressive career than Faker's, and I don't know that Faker or anyone could do what Rookie has done, is because, have you noticed when people compare Rookie and Faker, they don't even mention that Rookie plays in China. They act like the fact he's in China is incidental only in that they don't play each other in the domestic league in LCK all the time, and they haven't met enough times, right? They don't ever factor in when they say, well, I think Faker's better than Rookie, that Faker played his whole career, 100% of it, speaking to people in his native language, Korean, who were from Korea. They were all Korean, and he never ever had to leave his home, and he lived in his hometown the whole time, right? Meanwhile, Rookie, who they're judging as if he was in the same setting, played the majority of his career in the LPL, which won, by the way, for most of history has been harder to qualify to international tournaments from than Korea. That's, if you just go and look it up, because of the Korean exodus, that is just almost a fact, even though it's an opinion, obviously. I'd just say I could make a very good case for it. Two, because he is Korean himself, that means when he talks to his teammates, remember, Faker's doing all this great shot calling, right? Rookie is speaking to some Korean teammates like fucking the Shy are Korean, and the Shy famously wasn't fluent in Mandarin. So he was speaking, are you ready? Rookie himself, after enough years, learned Mandarin to speak to some of the Chinese players in Mandarin. Then he would translate to the Shy into Korean. And then, by the way, before he got good enough at Mandarin, which takes years and years of loads of hours a day, they would all speak essentially pidgin English. Not even English like we do in LEC. In LEC, when Jankos talks to Perks, it doesn't matter that Perks comes from Croatia and Jankos comes from Poland. When I say they're not speaking their native language, it's both of their second language. They're both very fluent. They could come in this call right now and understand everything we're saying. So if you don't know, guys, Korean and Chinese, there are a few characters of Chinese in Korean, but they are totally different languages. In fact, Chinese is even a tonal language compared to Korean. It's so different that it takes, I've been told it takes 5 or 6 years to even get to the level of being like a child if you were in one of the countries and you'd learn vice versa. So I think it's actually bonkers that is never factored into any discussion about Faker and Rookie's careers. Because think about how much easier Faker had it as a result than Rookie. Then I'll chuck a couple of other details in. Now look at what Rookie did accomplish, being a Korean, speaking English to some people and Chinese to others and translating for others, which is he not only won Worlds. Now I'm just going to put this out there. There's only one mid lane has ever repeated Worlds, and that is Faker, who we've just explained is sat in the best possible position. None of the other LPL, all those LPL Korean mids that have won Worlds, no one ever repeated. Doinby never got 2, Scout never got 2, no one ever got 2. It's all, Rookie didn't either, by the way. So what my point is, when people go, but Faker has 4 Worlds, and yes, what? As far as we can tell, only Faker, and arguably you could say Showmaker probably should have 2, but he fucked up that one against Scout. It's only people who are from Korea can ever have 2, as far as we can tell. So I don't even know whether that's a diss against Rookie. Then I'll just throw this out there. Remember what I just said about how at times he's having to speak English, and before you know... By the way, he was winning MVP of the LPL before he ever was fluent in Mandarin. I think he won the MVP first time like 2016, and they didn't even used to give out the MVP, by the way, in like Season 5. He is a 4-time LPL MVP, if people don't know. That's throughout this whole career. He's done something like 9 All-Pro teams or 8 All-Pro teams. By the way, one of them, he was on the second team this spring with this fucking whack-ass NIP. So if you look at what this guy's actually accomplished, champion of the league, bazillion times up. By the way, I'll just throw in a few things about his teammates that Faker never had anything approaching. So you might think, there have been times when Faker had like split effort for fucking support, or, you know, he had like, for example, Hooney was a bit up and down. Bro, that's not... None of the Faker players are ever on the level of this. And I'm about to name someone. Do you remember Z-Tai? He used to be the mid laner of the IG. Then he became the top laner for 2 years. Now, you know what's funny? He wasn't bad. I'll tell you what, Faker's not taking role swapped people, boys. Then I'll give you another one. Do you know who used to be the ADC of Rookie? A guy called Kid. He then just played fucking jungle for like a year. Bro, look, Rookie's winning MVP when this is going on. So the reason I actually did this hot take is because 1, it's an amazing hot take. 2, it's the headline to the episode. But 3, it's actually got some substance to it. You probably thought I was wilding here. You probably thought this was just going to be an eye test thing or what do I like. But I actually think contextually, I think people are doing that argument all wrong. By the way, at the end of it, you can still say you think Faker's better or he won more. That's all great. But I think that's an interesting way to frame it. Come on, guys, hit me with it. Do you hate it?
I have just one question.
Go on.
Wasn't he in KT Arrows or Bullet that won 2014?
Yeah, for like 1 year.
One of the Hazard split.
Yeah.
Right. So he beat Samsung Blue and Samsung White on their prime to become the champion. And he didn't make Worlds back then, right? Right. So that's I think that for the people who watch League for a long time, being the champion of the LCK of the OGN Summer in 2014 is a lifetime achievement. It was probably one of the tournament that was harder than Worlds. Let's be honest.
That was amazing that year. Yeah,
it was harder than Worlds.
It was way harder than Worlds. Way harder. That year it was insanely harder because China wasn't a team already.
You're right.
I mean, there is some substance to the arguments. I'm gonna start. Sorry.
Go on.
I think it is very. I think that there is a reason why Rookie is a fan favorite for a lot of people. I think that because already in terms of playstyle, he plays extremely well, and everybody knows that like if not for the career choices, his trophy shelf would be like twice as big.
Yes.
I feel like it is very hard to compare him to Faker, obviously, right? And I will still stand that the take is extremely hot in that sense. But I would say that I think that winning Worlds in 2018, he has been the leading factor, one of the leading factor in China becoming a major region. If you look at like the transformation of Chinese teams between 2014,
that was the first ever LPL Worlds win. You're right, yeah.
And LPL has never been the same since, right? I feel like these team, IG, was the experiment for the blueprints of what will become the Chinese team in the future. If you look at Ben, right, he walks in the Shy footsteps. Yes. Having carried top laners is like one of the signature moves of China on bruisers, right? Like melee champion that carry through side lanes. Chinese signature. Like even Korea, they play Jace. They are really good at Jace. They poke, they play space very well. But they're mostly, I would say, semi weak side. They're not like purely strong side. So there is a lot of things to say that being at the center of a team that nobody counted on, and if you look at the teammates with whom he won Worlds that year, trajectory after,
of course,
it's not brilliant.
They're pretty much known without him. Yeah.
So
it's only the Shy and Jackie, that's it.
Yeah. So there is clearly like a huge contributing factor of Rookie to the LPL and to the state it's currently in. Even though I think that someone that like Knight is probably better than him. I don't think the LPL, I wouldn't say like he's better than Faker, but I don't know if any foreign player would have helped the LPL shape to the point it is right now as much as Rookie did, ever.
Yeah.
So I'll go one thing. I actually think there's like a framing here. I actually think if you like swap them over, they would have like, if you gave them each other circumstances, they would have both done worse than each other. As in, like, if you had given Faker Rookie's like path in life, he would have done like worse than Rookie, and if you had given Rookie Faker's path in life, he would have done worse than Faker. And the reason I say this, if you go look at some of like, so like take season 5 Worlds, okay, when Rookie was, you know, a good LPL member, carries IG to Worlds, but like his team just doesn't understand lane swaps, and neither does Rookie. Like they actually just categorically just don't know what's like going on, and eventually by tournament end, like Faker's like team and Faker have like the best understanding of that like meta and and the picks. You know what I mean? It's like the only human being on the planet playing like Ryzen, for example. You would never have gotten that with Rookie. Rookie, you know what I mean? I think Rookie was mainly playing Orianna and LeBlanc in that tournament. But you would not, Faker in 2018 would never have been Rookie. The other thing the TAD put out against him, not against him, but in terms of career trajectory, Rookie has the weird thing, and this all just depends on who you are, like in terms of your analysis. His best year of his like performance is contested in people's like mind's eye for who was the best player. So like I think Rookie's best year is 2018, and I think he's the best player of that year. But some people think it's Uzi. Like people think it's Uzi because he won the 2 LPL splits in the MSI, but I actually think it's Rookie. I don't care. And then other people actually think it's the Shy. Other people think Rookie's own teammate was better than Rookie because at the Worlds, even though he was like literally getting subbed out and like fucking about and stuff. By the way, he literally didn't play an entire playoffs because he broke his fucking hands, right? That like he's like substituted, and actually like he was more impressive in terms of like, and he was up against harder competition at the tournament. You know what I mean? He was up against like Smeb, and the Rookie was didn't have the most favorable matchup until like UK.
By the way, remember as well that they also gave fucking Ning MVP of the finals too, which is like, what even is this? What? Yeah, all he did is get the skull crab every game. Like,
that is the killer. The really interesting bit with Rookie, and this is the thing, is he also, and I've watched, Rookie's a player I can safely say I think I've watched every single game of his of his career, and he has like an unbelievable magical career. Rookie's like, people talk about like, the IG int, you know, when the game goes to like shit, and one thing that people don't often talk about Rookie is Rookie like not so much tilts. I don't know if it's tilts because you can't really see the emotions of it, but when the game goes to like shit and like the decision making of IG goes to like shit, everyone kind of likes to go like hands off and go, oh, don't blame Rookie, right? But I've seen some of those games, like I've seen like the Shy and like Rookie be like going in with them, like the two of them into like 3 and 4 like people. And it's part of like his charm because he's an immensely like aggressive, like but controlled like player. But like there was something about that team. There was like an aura and majesty about that team of like they had these like, you know what I mean? Like for example, obviously at the same tournament, T1 was upset by G2, but IG literally imploded like live on stage at MSI, losing to like TL. Right, and sure. Rookie, you know, I mean, and Rookie literally had like an implosion. He then also had an absolute implosion with the V5 team. He went in as the #1 de facto team. Were they NIP or the V5 at the time? They were V5. They went in as the de facto best team. by far and away in spring, and I don't even think they reached finals. I think they got put out by TES with like Knight, and RNG beat them as well. And then in the summer, they had the exact same implosion in game. This time they didn't even have Karsa like on the team. So because you get so much less media stuff, it would be really interesting to see what's going on with like with rookie teams. But his ability to keep his like personal level up, because he's only 1 year FAKER'S like junior, but his actual individual levels like outlasted FAKER'S.
It's ridiculous.
By like yeah. Like,
by the way, that's even another point I would make, which is here's another reason why FAKER'S career is completely unfair compared to rookies, right? You know how FAKER for the last like 5 years has just played like the Zhao general style, not like I have to carry the lane. Rookie wouldn't even have that option. He plays in a fucking second language. Like, Rookie actually has to still be a person who can be, like I said, this year, a fucking second team all LPL mid laner. Like, he actually just has to still carry from mid lane. Like, and as a result, even though I agree, he obviously hasn't been close to the best player the last, like, 3 years, he's still top 3 or 4 guys at his role. It's actually bonkers. Like, his longevity is actually impossible. Like, I always used to say the only other player, like, Uzi didn't have long enough and he was overrated in the LPL. The 2 players who actually have the best longevity in League of Legends, FAKER isn't one of them. The 2 players are Deft and Rookie, because they actually are able to be elite players for that long as well. That's the part that melts my brain. Like, dude, even last year on D+, fucking Deft was still good, guys. He had like all the best laning stats, etc. Like 10 years into his career, that's impossible. So yeah, there we go. Right, what's the next take? Who's up next?
Okay. This one I know, like, it got hot for the French audience, but I don't know how it's gonna do with the international audience.
Okay.
I personally think that winning the LPL is at least equally as hard as winning Worlds, if not harder.
Okay.
Especially.
So it's a bit like the argument we just made about OGN champions. It used to be harder than Worlds. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that back then in the OGN champion, with the density and the fact that they
I agree with you. It was, in my opinion, yeah.
But so let me explain. So first, you can look at like T1 last year. They pretty much won the LPL, right? Like if you look at the bracket stage, it's only LPL, and they beat Weibo at the end.
True.
And it was pretty much the final, like the final that everybody expected was just like, JDG versus T1. So I think that if you look at the density of teams and the difference of playstyle in China, the problem you have is if you have not been excellent, which is already very hard during the regular season, and you do not have a seeding that allows you to go to the lower bracket, considering that there might be a team that plays insane macro, one is going to play insane fighting, one's insane like jungle pressure. You need to be so well-rounded against so many diverse like threats to your team that it is borderline impossible to prepare for all of them. And the teams that usually do well in regular season, they have a second chance in the lower brackets. But I feel like if you're like looking in comparison to the LCK, this year it's probably, and this summer it's probably slightly different. But we have been having a lot of G2, T1, Gen.G, and then sometimes Damwon, but already at Damwon there is a pretty huge drop in level, and the rest is pretty easy. There is very, very few upsets, and usually you know who's gonna end in first and second, so you immediately qualify to Worlds. And winning the trophy is kind of like, performance of the day. Recently it's been Gen.G. I feel like in China, if you're not seeded in the top 3, top 4, the gauntlet you have to go through is just inhuman. It's literally inhuman. You play NIP. NIP is not an easy match. If you take NIP, you take them to Worlds, they might go in semifinals. I know it's a hot take. People will disagree.
No, sure.
I think JDG, who didn't make it, could even go to finals of Worlds. These teams don't even make it to Worlds. And you're playing Team Liquid, you're playing Gigabyte Marines, you're playing Fnatic, and then you get to quarterfinals, and you can win Worlds by having to beat only Chinese teams. So I wouldn't say every single year on every single draft, but with the Swiss system where the seeding is poor, I think that currently, with the current system, winning LPL is actually at least equally as hard as winning Worlds.
Go on, Keire.
Right. My issue of this is, maybe now with the Swiss and the JDG year, but almost every other year, I disagree, because the Worlds win is defined by the Korean team that you beat. As in, like, ADG is defined by the fact that they beat Showmaker Khan, the Damwon, like, gaming like lineup, right, okay? And then the Chinese team, like Ben's lineup, they upset the LPL they went through, and they ended up losing to like the damn one. The IG guys, nobody really talked so much about them beating Fnatic. It was actually them overcoming KT in the BO5 in the quarterfinal that everyone talks about. That was actually like an early semi-final. So in terms of like the concentration of games and the difficulty of the format, like in terms of like the concentration of elite teams, I can agree with that. But the problem is that Worlds often is defined by at any given era by the top tier elite Korean team, and you must overcome them basically, like for it to actually like matter. And if you like dodge them or they like fuck up or anything like that, people would like point that out and like dog it down a lot. Plus, in like yesteryears, LPL was like a lot more was a lot weaker compared to like Korea, even with like the expertise, because you had like the Faker lineup, etc., and the Rox Tiger guys. But I understand it there. The other thing that's really interesting though about about Worlds though is you had loads and loads. Remember, you had for years it was always about like no one. The only team, it was like OMG was the only team to beat Koreans in like a BO5. Like or something in like 2014, they were like the only team. Like that's like completely shattered. And so the actual like below the elite level teams, like I can see that. Like amongst all that, I actually think the LPL is so much harder to overcome like all of those teams and make it through all of that. But the top is of Korea, it's so impossible. Like the levels of those teams at time, they like define like eras in terms of like they're the team you like talk about, like folk playing against, and like everyone copies them and looks to them to see what they're doing, etc.
I would say, by the way, I actually agree with the take. I mean, the funny thing is, even though I guess back in the day, some people would have thought the LCK OGM was a hot take. I think it used to be Monty's take, and I always agreed with him, because at the time, not only was Korea the best region, like in fact, they were the only team, realistically, their best team that should win Worlds every time. But then also, because they were the best region, the point is, you could just be very cynical. It was, do you want to have 3 teams from the best region or 8 teams from the, like, that's 8's obviously better, and it's harder to win against 7 really good Korean teams than just 2 Korean teams and a bunch of Chinese teams, which at the time, Chinese teams used to be sort of like, they wouldn't even have won the LCK. They would have been like a dark horse, would have been 3rd or 4th, even the best teams usually. And then I'll also throw in there as well, right, it's actually even more so the case now though. Like this year's a perfect year. I think the last 2 or 3 years, if people don't know, the reason why it's so boring reading the 1 millionth thread about Rookie, where people talk Keire as though like there's not VODs, and they talk like we're talking about like fucking Pele, and we just have to go off stories and we can't go and watch the games. Like, bro, they do that thing on Reddit where they go, well, which is it? Is he just actually not good enough to get to Worlds, or is he being an idiot? It's like, why are you saying that like it's a question? You can go and look. Like, if you ever go and look, here's the problem Rookie has. He always goes to the regional, and the regional's a fucking nightmare. The regional of the LPL is the hardest gauntlet ever in the history of League of Legends from day one. There is a reason Doinby failed it like 3 times in a row, something mental. Like a million times, people like Rookie, Doinby, and even sometimes people like Knight have just fallen in that fucking regional over and over again. Because that regional is what shows you how deep the league is. The playoffs, I agree. You have a lot of teams that can make the top 4 part, the double impact, which I think is awesome. I agree with both parts. One, there's so many matches because of the gauntlet part of the LPL playoffs. It actually means sometimes you do get a team like a BLG that can do a crazy run through it and go way up. But then also the top 4 part, they finally implemented that in LCK the last couple of years, means you can also have rematches. By the way, without rematches, fans, last year T1 doesn't even make, this spring T1 doesn't even make the final. Hanwha beat them in the upper bracket, but the point is they came back after that and won it. So already that shows it's harder if you can sometimes have to beat someone twice than beat them once. And then I also think if you look at the depth of the league, right, I'll just do this split. So this split, you had BLG and TES looked awesome anyway. LNG got it together with their roster. Yeah, you had JDG was like on the outskirts. Maybe they'll be all right. NIP's sort of okay once they got to the playoffs. Absolute Legends was mixing up. But then obviously the team that came out of nowhere was Weibo. And they didn't just come out of nowhere. They went all the way to the final of LPL, even beating people like Top, who everyone thought could only lose to BLG. And then they just qualified to Worlds too. So like that's like 6 or 7 names I just listed off there. And by the way, take out Absolute Legends off. They were just like an up-and-coming team. The other 6 teams, I agree with him on even the NIP one. If NIP had gone to Worlds as the 4th LPL team, they could fuck around and make top 8. They could maybe even make a semi if they get the right opponent. What if they get like fucking D plus or something. That's plausible. That could actually happen. That could be the actual report you could get. So suddenly you're into the top 4 already, even though the joke is NAP probably shouldn't even be top 4 in the LPL. So hasn't that just made the case for me right there? Like, they probably shouldn't even be as high in the LPL as they could be at Worlds. And then last thing I'll say is, what was the last angle? Oh, last angle is this. I actually think at this point in time, this is a hot take in itself, I actually think it helps Faker. Because remember, except for 2022, he's never coming out of Korea now as the best team anymore. He's coming out as like himself, like second or third best team. And then, so in theory, every world team on an international tournament, he's on a dark horse team. Here's one of the reasons I think his teams perform better. Because actually, it's an advantage that the other opponents don't have familiarity with T1. The teams we're all talking about, if LNG and JDG had all played T1 4 times that year, they were in the LPL, they'd played them in the double elim bracket and a final and a semi and a regional, it wouldn't be the same match. Like, yeah, you could still get affected by pressure, you could still blow it, but I actually think that if you're someone like JDG, bro, you only played T1 like once or twice that year. That was the second time they played them. They won at MSI and then they lost at Worlds. That actually can help you if you're a lesser team, by the way. It can make it easier to win the tournament. In the LPL, another reason it's really hard to win the LPL is because you know every single one of these teams and they know you as well, mate. It's really hard. Like, that's why, by the way, when someone like Weibo actually does beat top esports to make the final, I have to actually start asking, even though when I look at the roster, I don't agree. I have to go, maybe Weibo is better. I actually have to ask that question for real. If that was Worlds, I could say maybe it was a bad day, maybe maybe the jet lag got to them, maybe they haven't adjusted to the meta. Who are they scrimming on the other side of the bracket? I don't have to say any of that shit in the LPL. So I actually agree. I think the LPL is stacked as fuck. It's another reason low key, by the way, that actually ties into my rookie point, which is, by the way, he's still really good now in arguably the most competitive and hardest league ever in League of Legends history. He's still mixing it up now.
To put an analogy on it, right, okay, it's basically how your value system works. Do you think it's harder to win, like, old La Liga, like, because you must overcome either, like, Real Madrid or Barcelona, like Atletico did twice, right? And then, that would be Korea, because you have to be either better than T1 or Gen G, and they're always fucking awesome, right? And then you've got the LPL is more like the Barclays Premier League, or like the Premier League, right? Where sometimes we've got the best team in the world, but more often than not, right, they're just an unbelievably top to bottom stacked league. And it's basically whatever value system you think is like harder. I think placing high at Worlds is easier than the LPL. I would say that, but winning Worlds is so fucking hard because usually you're going to be up against some motherfucker who's like a dynastic level like team attempting to trailblaze their legacy. That's why I put so much stock, by the way, in that EDG win, but even though it was under like fucking pretty shitty conditions. That like the thing was is like they beat Showmaker and Canyon with Can in their prime. Like, as in, like, there wasn't any excuses. Like, that was, like, the prime of those teams. So, like, you know what I mean? You can't take away from that type of stuff. Like, that was, like, monumental for those guys.
Okay.
I think, I mean, it's a hot take at the end of the day, but I feel like it's still... I think here, the winning thing, the top one, probably, like, securing top 2. I would say the final take would be securing top 2 is much harder in the LPL than at Worlds. I think it's much harder in the LPL, but at Worlds, I would say winning Worlds because you have to beat these very specific Korean team. I think.
And by the way, this is actually another thing, but I could make this a hot take too, but I won't. Everything doesn't have to be a hot take, even on this show. Which is also, to this day, 99% of fucking Korean narratives are just faker. They're just faker. You take the greatest outlier ever and you just act like... Because people have done this throughout all history. They've always gone, oh yeah, the thing about Koreans is they're more clutch. No, you're wrong. That's faker. Like, do you know who the other greatest Koreans of all time are? Chovy. I mean, Rookie actually is pretty clutch. But Peanut. So these are all the players you say choke. If it wasn't for Faker, you'd actually say Koreans have a big choking problem. So I'll also just throw this in there. That thing about it's harder to win Worlds is really just because Faker is unbelievable under pressure in Worlds playoff series. As soon as Faker retires, mate, we can revisit this conversation because I think that take will go away, Keire, and it'll just be the LPL all day long, mate. Because when it's only the Chovies and the Peanuts and the Khans of the world and the Defts, all of a sudden, that's no one's shitting their there's no boss music players when they play. They're mega players. The joke is Chovies better than Faker, but he doesn't have that same aura, mate. So I also do think that helps. Like, Faker's like, he's doing a lot of heavy lifting on like the fucking intimidation factor of the LCK. As soon as he exits that game, mate, I think it's going to get a lot different. Chinese supremacy will occur. I've got a hot take like this. It's actually an LPL related one. It's perfect. It ties into what you were just saying. So here's the problem. If you watched all this year of the LPL, you will know that the craziest globe is actually easily Weibo Gaming. It's actually impossible. Because even when they added Tarzan, who I'm a massive fan of, obviously everyone else is completely out on him because all the fans on Reddit, just like they refuse to watch Knight's career, they refuse to watch Chovy's career, they refuse to watch what Tarzan does in the LPL. So what I don't get is, he was sick when he was on Griffin, he just choked a little bit in playoffs. He is sick in the LPL for like 3 different teams now, by the way, guys. He just chokes. Not even that much in the playoffs, more internationally in the LPL. And so, as a result, they didn't think adding him would do that much. Now, initially it didn't, but then somehow, just in playoffs, this team just did like one of those things where every round they just get a bit better. And every time they just played up to the level of the opponent and just pipped them every time. They probably should have lost to all these teams. They could have lost to fucking TES. They could have lost to I mean, they eventually did just lose to LNG when they played them again in the regional, didn't they? But that was a match I thought LNG's going to 3-0. They get 3-2'd. And the way that they won actually means I think they've pretty much redeemed most of the people on that roster. And so even though if you think about the balance of power, if I was to do a quick power ranking for the year, like who's going to win Worlds, I think most people would go like this. They'd go Gen G first because of MSI, so they're not going to give it to BLG. Then maybe if they watch the LPL, they'll go, right, I'll put BLG second, though. BLG's been dominant in the LPL. I think third, they would have debatable. If you're a mega T1 fan, you put T1, but I think it's egregious to do that. You have to show the glow. I think they're going to probably say TES if you watched LPL. They looked very good. Hanwha Life probably should be third, but they get to be fourth because they have Zika. No one believes in them. And Thorin. No one believes these people are going to win Worlds. I'm sorry. Then you have probably T1 if you're a big fan, if they're going to have the globe. Right, if you're doing that list, I just read 5 names off there and Weibo didn't even make the list. So here's the hot take. I actually think it's not even just they could. This Weibo gaming team will make the semis of Worlds. There's your hot take. Now here's why. Because one, notice some of those teams I just listed off there are really good teams. They might even be better than Weibo, but they haven't actually ever done anything. Like, spoiler, Top Esports hasn't won any LPLs. Not with this lineup. Like, they were supposed to be better than Weibo. Where were they in the final? Where were they? They weren't there, mate. Then you have, like, Hanwha Life. I just said it there. Does anyone actually believe Thorin and Zika are winning fucking Worlds? Does anyone have that down? I don't think that's even plausible. Same thing I'll even say with T1. Look, you can do that thing forever. I can tell you, I know how narratives work. You know when you do that thing of like, Fakers never failed to make top 4. Do you know the second he loses in the group stage or a quarterfinal, that will no longer even mean anything? There won't be like, well, pause, referee, pause to get... That's impossible. I can't lose in quarter. It's not actually a real thing. It's not momentum. It's just actually a pattern that played out many times. So that could even go away. So the reason I'm going to say Weibo will make semis is because, first of all, since I actually think they've redeemed all the roster, now, when you watch how they play now the roster's actually fire, guys. That roster on paper and in the server is good. Like, if you think about who they have. So Tarzan actually is back to being a very good jungler, by the way. He played very well against a lot of the other LPL junglers here. Xiao Hu does that thing where he's certainly not in the last couple of years been on his prime. His prime was years ago. He used to be an all classic shoe-in for all LPL. He isn't anymore, but he actually, similar as that take from last week, he also has the faker quality where he's really clutch. He's fucking mega in playoff series, boys. You put this guy in a game 5, I trust what he picks, and I trust that he can win you the game. Not even, by the way, like rookie. He's not going to smash the game, but he'll win you the game. He'll win you that game with that, that like 3-1-2 performance on Corky or something. He'll just win you a close game where he wins the one key fight. Then you've got in the bot lane, if you didn't just see the most recent regional, Light, who used to be the problem child of fucking LNG, he actually is really good now, mate. Like, he's actually for real having like the best year of his career. He's like glowed up. Crisp, I always thought was unfairly maligned because he wasn't ever the player that he was when he won Worlds. That guy always, on every team he's ever been on, has a couple of champions, he's just deadly on, mate. If you just give him those champions, it's game over. He's a fucking sick mechanical player. And then the top laner, Breathe, was always half decent anyway when he's on teams like WE. And if you think about the meta right now, bro, it's literally the Renekton meta. That is what this motherfucker plays. Give this guy the Renekton, the Cassandra, he's going to... So the actual roster's just good. It's just a fucking good team of players. So I think if you look at Worlds, like I said, think about the teams that are going to be there. Bro, unless they basically draw, for me, like a Gen G or a BLG in the first round of the playoffs, I think they can win against a lot of these teams. I actually think they're going to be like a surprise factor. So there's my hot take. Weibo, top 4 at Worlds. By the way, it would have been the hottest take ever if I said it a month ago, but I'd have no reason to say it a month ago, would I?
So, it's all right. Here's my problem, right? The fucking Worlds format is just so... Like, it's like reading fucking tea leaves at a cup, right? Of like, oh, look, who did you get in the first stage? Okay, sure. Right? So, there is an angle. My thing I would say is I'm looking, okay, at all the.
All right, as a caveat, I don't mean if they get like some all Western teams in the fucking Swiss, obviously, yeah.
I'm not even joking here. Except for like Fnatic, right? I actually don't think they would win against anyone in the BO5. And that might be a hot take. I've got TL in there as well, by the way. Because like,
wait a minute, Weibo couldn't beat anyone at Worlds in a best of 5. What's the take?
Favored. As in, like, I don't think they would. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying, like, in terms of, like, if they were to get them in the quarterfinals, who would I predict?
So G2 would also beat them in a best of 5?
Yes, yeah, G2 would also.
I just saw G2 lose to Mad Lions, mate, but all right, fair enough.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, I was just telling you what I think, mate. I was like...
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Mate, all I'm going to say is, okay, like, Crisp, a great player, my mind. He was doing some running and he got his arse fucking bailed out by Tarzan and Light, okay? Light, as you said, he was the problem child. I was actually going to come in with a hot take. I think you've got to start talking about Light being world class. I think he was unbelievable. Like, he was absolutely unbelievable. But the big thing I would say about this team is they're quite meta dependent in terms of like who they can beat. Because if the meta goes to like solo lane like flexes for like Xiaohu and Brave for like really potent counters, that really suits them. Like Brave's really good in counter matchups. And if you can get like stable bot lanes, like where Crisp is allowed to affect the map, they like benefit from a lot of the same things that like G2 does. But like, I don't know, mate. There's just sometimes I watch like the decision making of this team. It's just so inconsistent. Like there's sometimes I'm rubbing my hands together. I'm like, oh my god, they're macro. They're geniuses. It's like they're not going to the dragon. They're concentrating gold on like Xiaohu, and then Xiaohu.
By the way, they have won a lot of fucking close games. A lot of those like 35-minute games they have won. I have to say, yeah.
And then Xiaohu starts powering up the TP to go to the fight, and I'm like, no, why are you going to the fight, Xiaohu? So I'm not sure, like. Remember the Worlds format? It's not that hot. It's just, mate, Weibo, just when I watch Weibo, mate, they're so unaesthetic as like a team. It's just like hero plays and comeback stuff, and I can see the heart in it, but my brain just tells me, no, don't.
That's why it's a good hot take. I actually want. Sometimes people need to disagree to make them hot takes. So come on.
Yeah, no, I'm just standing here and I'm just like, I can't. The same way as I can't trust Fnatic. They're Chinese Fnatic. They're
I'll give you one last reason though. The one last reason I can also make. By the way, it is a really hot take. The reason I can give this really hot take as well is because it actually doesn't violate a core rule of mine when it comes to predictions, which is I have a really hard time, Zaboutine, making predictions if I really don't believe in a player. So, for example, on Best Damn League Show in this last episode, I basically said almost every factor actually says I should pick Fnatic to win this fucking LEC final. If they're ever going to do it, it'd be now. But then when I did my bet on my betting sponsor, I even just said I can't in good faith bet on Noah to become the LEC champion. I had to go. I'm going to have to ignore all that analysis and just say he isn't. And spoiler, you know what? Worked out, didn't it? I mean, he didn't even play bad, but it did work out. So similarly, that's why weirdly I can also pick Weibo. Because as I said, I actually think when they were bad before they had Tarzan, it almost didn't make sense how bad they were. You looked at the roster, you're like, this should be better than this, mate. Look at it. You've got like a bunch of pretty good players here. So I actually think there's no one I actually dislike on this roster. I think they're all pretty good players generally. What's your take? I feel like you're going to come in with a different angle on this. So come on.
I actually think that after watching every single World, there is some variance. Every single time the dude who wants to pick them is just sometimes that clicks random because nobody is able to predict, right? If we wouldn't be watching World, if last year it was just GNG, versus versus a JDG in the final. Like, it doesn't work that way. Nobody expected Weibo to be in the final. Nobody expected like them to beat BLG. Nobody expected BLG to beat Genji. And I can go back in time year after year like the KT versus the Griffin. There is plenty of occurrences of like things happening. So I think first the variance that this team has is pretty much playing in their favor because yes, they have an in factor, but as you said and as we said last episode, I think Xiao is very consistent. He doesn't have the highest peaks, but when the stake is here, he's a tournament player and he plays much better when he's under pressure in a tournament setting. So I can count on Xiao on at least being at the level you expect from him at Worlds. I think the bot lane is really good. I mean, even last year, they've always been very, very good. I don't see any. It's very hard for the Western. The Western palette is not really educated to the Chinese bot lanes. Let's say it that way, and we have a very hard time. Like we kind of carry on. To the Korean ones that play in China to try to gauge who's good and who's bad because people have a very hard time to rate them. But I think they're actually really good, and I think Tarzan was one of the all-time best junglers in the world. I think he has his ups and downs, but I mean, I'm part of the Chovy and Tarzan Church back in the days, and I always felt like the trajectory of his career hasn't really served his like actual level. So I know that one team amongst top esports, BLG, Genji is gonna choke. There has to be at least one. So if there is one, then why not, right? If we consider like actual hot take would be like, Team Liquid is making semis, I would be like, quarter is going to be great for making final. But making final is completely doable for Weibo because of all the players they have, the experience they have, the clutch factor they have, just the ability to play at Worlds, the knowledge of their opponents, the track record. It's not like, oh guys, shaking up because they're playing game 5 against, I don't know, G2, and they're like, oh my god, we got to be eliminated. Sure, you got eliminated plenty of times. You know what it takes to come back the next year and stuff. So I would say definitely not the highest likelihood, but I would saying like it's impossible.
All right, you know what? The problem is
they would lose to G2.
He's agreeing too much, so I feel like I have to up the score for. All right, they're going to make the final. There you go. They're making the final again, even though it makes no sense. There you go. They just somehow get a bracket. They're making the final. There you go. I made it harder for you.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet that. I wouldn't bet that much money on
it. No, like what he's just said is fucking crazy, mate. Like, I can't believe, mate. Chris might be one of the luckiest fuckers to
Don't
ever
worry
be
about
at
it.
Worlds
Don't worry about it.
Right? Mate, I was like, mate, him and Mickey X were cosplaying. Like they were checking how good their teammates were. They were like, so if I die 8 times, that still get to play finals? That get to win? If I die 10 times, do I get to win LEC? It's like, yes, you do, Mickey. You do, in fact. The floor is that low for you that you do, in fact, get to be an LEC champion with 15 deaths. Thank you, Mickey X.
Guys, I have a take.
Go on.
Okay.
On LEC.
Right.
I think that MDK, as Europeans, is everything we should wish for in terms of qualified team for Worlds.
That's it. It's a great opening line. I'm already ready. Strap in. Let's go. Let's go.
And the reason is, we've seen a plethora of extremely experienced players leaving Europe to go to Worlds, get some experience, fail pretty strongly, go back and qualify the next year again and again and again, right? In
Rogue, Mad Lions, all the of course.
Rogue, Mad Lions, Fnatic again, Fnatic a third time, you name it. Why wouldn't we be English Hop excited of having a team composed of 4 rookies coached by a staff that never had the opportunity to prove themselves on the international stage and get some experience to try to grow a legacy of players that will probably be better in the next years. A lot of teams, I remember when I was speaking to Power of Evil in 2018, he told me, like, playing at Worlds, and he told me, like, his mid laning against Xiao actually was a game-changing experience, eye-opening moments. When he was telling me, like, I discovered how bad we were in the West. And I think for Mirwin, for Frescovi, even for the bot lane, who supposedly has a lot of potential, they were playing the finals of the EMEA Master last year, right, in Montpellier. And now they're going to Worlds. So as a region, right, how come it's not exciting to see this instead of seeing like, I don't know, Odo Amne, Larsen, Patrick, and name it, like Hillisung going back, doing a lukewarm, experience at Worlds and losing to, like, I don't know, Gigabyte Marines and going back home and saying, oh, sorry guys, we failed on Twitter. Why wouldn't we be excited about it? That's my take.
Because Zaboutine, that's it. I
love it.
Got me riled up. Look,
I'm French. They're Spanish, right? There is a rivalry. So it's a take that's hard for myself too, but I had to make one, right? It's a hot take.
Fucking nationalities, you just slipped in Larsen losing into Gigabyte Marines. Bro, this guy was dogging on Yagal, by the way. Like, he was almost solo carrying against JDG, and you're coming on this show, be like, oh, he nearly lost to Gigabyte Marines. But don't bother writing the history books. I know the French have got a monopoly on it, maybe. You shouldn't be involved. Larsen was a fucking baller at Worlds, by the way. And Frescovi could be fucking Larsen could be fucking a malnourished fucking man, right? And Frescovi, just this 1 year, just because Larsen's been a bit of shit, everyone's like building churches in Frescovi. Mate, all those churches are going to collapse in on themselves and kill everyone that's fucking praying at them, mate. The guys... Right, okay. I felt like I was getting a lullaby spoke to me there. I was like, oh, the rookies, they are so good. No, like, I want it's only because Rogue is just such a fuck up in terms of like GMing, right? Okay, and everyone else in Europe decided to play like top trumps of like, oh, you get to have this guy, and then I get to have this piece. They all fucked up. That Mad Lions just like power glided in and kind of like saved it at like the last second just by. And to be fair to them, they are one of the only teams that beat G2. But by the way, some happenstance that Merwin, range top specialists, and ADCs come into the fucking like meta. Like they must have been praying hard for that fucking one. Like what else have you got? Fucking Frescove just doesn't need to lane. You were talking about it last time. Everyone's handshaking. How convenient when you've got like humanoid and caps in playoffs that you can hide behind your Ezreal and shoot your little Q darts from miles away. Even though he did like solo kill caps, but that doesn't suit my point. So whatever. Nah, mate, like
okay.
I mean,
I know what he means, though. Here's the thing. The reason why I know what he means is he means it more like this, Keire. He doesn't mean like these specific players. Like, it's better to have Frescove than to have, like, I don't know, fucking Nuke or something. Obviously, Nuke is a better mid laner. He means, like, the premise. I think this is what maybe was lost in the part where about, like, past teams going there and getting the experience but not being better next year, is when some of those teams go also, some of them do just get mentally broken by going. Like some of those Mad Lions players, they're almost, like, traumatized. They're going there not to lose in play-ins. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, the difference is rookies in theory do come in with the beginner's mind where they don't know that actually they should get clapped by all the LCK teams. They've never been there. So there's actually, believe it or not, sometimes with that, beginner's luck. That's a real concept where you sort of just do it. It's like the concept of those old cartoons. Essentially, Mad Lions might have run off a cliff, but because they haven't looked down yet, they don't know they're off the cliff. They're still running along like Roadrunner. So I do think there's a sort of logic to that. Like if you want it, essentially, here's the point, Keire. Being as the team that could have got is BDS. The difference is BDS is better than Mad Lions, but if you want a random BO1 upset in Swiss, Mad Lions is probably a better pick for you. Like, they are going to play wackier, they're probably going to have way more confidence than BDS would, they're probably going to do all those stupid triple flex picks to the top lane, where, like, no one even knows that's where Nidalee's going to be, or some stupid shit like, oh, Lulu or whatever. So in that world, I can agree with you. But I also do agree with you, Keire, which is, like, in no context ever, beyond that, like, abstract thing of, like, you know, I'm a beginner and a beginner's man. If I'm actually being real and I'm talking about this Mad Lions, in no universe do I want to see Frescove playing at Worlds. In no way would that ever fit the bill, as Zaboutine said, of what I want from LEC going to Worlds. In fact, in some ways, that would be my nightmare, to have a player like him represent the region, while indeed the aforementioned Larson wasn't even in playoffs. He just sat at home for about 2 months, just like, can I play? Like, shut the fuck up. Frescove's playing now. Like, brilliant. All right, so that's a thing. And also, I just think their team is going to get absolutely murdered. Like, even though people are hyped, like they'll get like the 1B01 upset, I don't think they have a chance in hell of making the top 8. Because, bro, once they hit those best of 3s, I think they're going to get murked by some of these teams.
Okay, so I have a rhetorical question. Do you think they are any worse than Energy last year? Do you think like Palafox is like miles ahead of Frescove? I mean, the difference is... Do you think, like, Biawin is, like, miles behind Dokla?
As a team, I would say they could be better as a team. In terms of individual players, I think NRG, some players were better. You know what I mean? Like Palafox probably is better than Frescove, if I had to say. But I think as a team, I think Mad Lions is better. I think the structure makes more sense now. They work with the jungler and stuff like that, you know. By the way, I actually think that NRG team, I won't do it now, it's not even a hot take, but I think that NRG team was hella overrated. Like, bro, Contracts had, like, the tournament of his life. Like, he's never done that ever again since. I don't even care about now when he made it. Like, who gives a shit now? Like, he didn't. He was whatever. He was whatever.
And everyone on G2 all simultaneously shat the bed for that one BO3 on the day. And, like, yeah, if you catch someone else's, like, diarrhea, like, fucking hell, but I wouldn't clap my hands in it. Like, I wouldn't, like, celebrate that, like, that was, like, a fucking great thing. Like, I would just go, I would take that and move on with my life.
It's how you know Americans just don't get big results at Worlds. Because, bro, there's been so many European results at Worlds. Even Europeans go, well, HUK did just miss pulling a Korean and got to play NX. Even Europeans say that because we've got other finals and semis to brag about. Americans will always say, we beat G2 and made top 8. And they'll never themselves mention, we didn't draw a single Asian team except Weibo, who we lost to. Like, they don't mention that detail because they know that part's bad for their argument. So they'll never actually give the whole... So I get why Americans overhype the NRG one, but whatever. Have we got one more take? I've got one more, so it depends if you guys do. Have you got one more, Keire?
I've got one, right, okay? everyone is dog shit at evaluating players and how good they are, except for me, and I do agree with me. And the reason is, right?
Reasonable take, okay, this is a pretty hot take.
Okay, so here we go. I've now got to fucking pretend through Reddit and Twitter and morons, right, that Ruler is just like 30% worse.
Right, sure.
Missing is like 30% worse. Kanabe is just a dog, right? Who else? Oh yeah, Canyon last year he wasn't good, right? But now Canyon's grew new hands.
Yeah.
There's a fucking fish serum in fucking Keire where they rejuvenate your fucking hands, right? That's what I've got to pretend now. It's like no, it's just they are now playing with the most they have just lost the most competent players of their era, and you have replaced them with less competent pieces, and their roles are like synergistic, like systematic. The only person on GDG who's actually like worse role for his role is 369. 369 is actually on like a performative downturn right now. He is actually categorically not just playing as well. But this, by the way, just goes on forever. Who else have you got? Oh yeah, Peanut, right? Peanut went from being macro genius, can control all of Gen G, set up all the Gen G. Then he goes over to HLA. That narrative's now completely dead. Peanut's just like a standard player, but then also Gen G's macro's better. Gen G are somehow just the perfect macro team without Peanut. And it's okay, so who's talking? Have I got to pretend Lehens, right? The fucking cutting wave specialist is macro controlling all the fucking... I doubt it. I really doubt it, right? More likely than not, right? That Chovik, people it's why teams that have got Knight in them have lots of the same archetypal problems and a lot of the same archetypal benefits. It's because these guys are the de facto best way to play best players, and so you play their versions of League of Legends. And the same thing, Thorin, happened with Jun. We've now all got to pretend that Jun, right, is a fucking idiot and a dog, when actually the problem's is bot lane, they can't get on the leash and actually not push enemy turrets and plates. If you stuck a big lollipop in lane, right, and you basically told them, they would guide towards it like exorcist missiles and kill themselves all the time. And because Wei is better at making them not die, right, he's now a better player than Jun. Nobody was saying Wei was better on NRG. Nobody was saying Wei was a good player. He's now an LPL champion. Everyone's fucking dog shit at doing it, mate. And I don't know why we even entertain it. Ruler right now is still a top 3 ADC in the world. Nobody would hang that as a talking point, though.
By the way, I just have to ask this obvious follow-up, which is, was that hyperbole? Do you just mean most people don't have good takes? Or do you actually mean only you can intuit the truth of League of Legends? And even us in this, we're just peons as well. We're just part of the unwashed masses. I'll let
you ascertain the answer from that. I don't like to divulge too much. You know what I mean? I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Well, you know what, Zaboutine, I'll let you take this one first. It's a bit of a hot take because basically we don't know anything about League of Legends either. But go on. What do you think?
The heat of the take is just insane. I know, it's the literal I am the only one who can rate.
It's pure solipsism in it. I know.
So obviously, right, Keire, I think you're probably a little bit off with this take. But what's very interesting about your take, though, is I think that there is a catastrophe of highlighting performance within the League of Legends environment. In FPSs, right, you kind of have these actual in-game stats, right? We were speaking about it last time, that if someone does I don't know, an opening kill every single round on Counter-Strike or Valorant, you kind of see that it contributes somehow to the game, right? It's easier to win in 5v4 than in 5v5. If someone has insane clutches, 1v2s, 1v3s, you can clearly see from the stats, because Riot has never done or never been able to produce relevant stats. And nobody is able to understand what it means to get mid-prio, to find a hole in enemy vision out of reading habits and sneaking a camp to get a spike and then doing a 2v2 top as a jungler will do. It's pretty much up to the co-streamers at this point and the analysts after on YouTube and stuff to try to pinpoint these things to highlight the quality of the players. Because first, it's impossible to rate ADCs. I think ADC should just be
probably
out
the hardest
of the
carry role
discussion.
to rail, right?
right? There's like, oh, this ADC is the GOAT. Like, oh, Ruler is the GOAT. And then the next year is Deft. It's like, yeah, but it's just and it was Uzi.
Yes.
All these guys are like insane, but Viper is insane, Gala is insane, Light is insane. All these guys are just crazy good at the game. It's just like, if they just have to hit the tank they're facing and they can do it, they will all do it. And then it's a matter of like one flash and one side step away from like being slightly better than the other on the D-Day. But the reality is, Egg Team is only about whether the mid can take the prio or absorb pressure, and what does the jungle support does around the map to create some spaces and hold in the vision in a way that you can actually extend your control space and get resources out of it. And nobody in the official broadcast has been able to do it in a short enough way for the mainstream to understand. So what we end up with is exactly what you say, Keire, which is like you go on Reddit and people start from the outcome, and then they try to retro-engineer the outcome. So, for instance, right, JGG didn't make it to Worlds. So there has to be a reason for that, right? We have to find the scapegoat. So Roller was never that good, and this guy is bad. And I think that Showmaker was the problem in the Showmaker Canyon duo, because no Canyon is winning. Not mentioning
the opposite take before. Exactly, yes.
Right. It's like, it makes literally no sense. I think that I'd say... I believe that some people do it very well, and I will give props to him, for instance, to Dom, who watches everything. And if you actually go on his streams and watch his co-streams, you like his styles or not, but I think he has a consistent grading of the players, and he always back his analysis with what they do in game. It's like, oh, here, I think Rookie should go top. Oh my God, he's going top. That's great. Very few players will actually go top there. It's very hard because he understands he's been a player. So it's like, here, you hear your jungle is like, can you come bot? Can you come bot? And you don't go bot, you go top, because this is where you're going to get your resources and you're going to carry the game. That's great vision here from, like, nobody can do that. Like, Caps will go bot and they will lose the game. And I feel like very few people, because you need some type of negativity to highlight the positivity. And because the Riot broadcast is usually very tame, they never have this contrast to showcase like, oh, this was like saying, oh, buff mid laner played like shit. But then it allows you to say the next mid laner played much better than these two guys, therefore he played well. And not like, oh, he won, he played amazing. And that's the real problem. For me, that's one of the core of the problem in the League of Legends environment.
By the way, I'll just pick up on that point that you made first, because obviously I come from the Counter-Strike and Quake background, etc. I will say that is one of the worst things about League of Legends. I told Monty this years ago. I said to him, the worst thing is people read the box score as if it was like sports like basketball or football or Counter-Strike, where actually the box score at least like roughly does correlate to how well you played. And what they naively do is in different sports or even games like Counter-Strike, sometimes even the guy on the losing team can still be the best player, and it was the best in the game, and he isn't totally inhibited by his team. But if you think about this, and anyone who understands MOBA is going to immediately know what I mean, the problem with MOBA is the game snowballs against you. It's not even just that your opponent does, the game snowballs against you. So in the same way as one of the reasons why, one of the factors as to why, if you do the opposite, lesser players like the aforementioned Crisp can do better when they're in a bad state of form, is because the game is easier for them the better their teammates play. It's the same reason why, spoiler, I actually think this year, if I was broken played, mate, beyond maybe the spring split, I wouldn't be bragging about this year, mate. Yeah, you won all the titles, or rather you watched other people win all the titles. You had to do fuck all in some of these matches, mate. Like, in fact, I've even seen finals where you just straight up lost and then you just won you got given the trophy at the end, like, hey, well done, mate. So I do think League is the ultimate game where, one, you can be carried and you can be on a good team. Two, you can be amazing on a bad team, but just trapped. And unfortunately, the scoreboard can't reflect it, because essentially, if you get heavily dominated, you will almost never be able to have a sick box score. It's why the rare times, by the way, that someone does, you're like, holy fuck, how good is this guy? So I'll give you a very quick example from Counter-Strike that'll elucidate this for you. It was mainly the player Simple, but back in the day, Kenny S did it a few times as well. In Counter-Strike, it actually became a normal thing now that if you're one of the true like GOAT players, Zeewoo's done it a few times now, Donk's done it, we actually let you win the MVP for the whole tournament, even if you come second. Because if you're really that insane, we can see in the game and on the scoreboard, actually, even though you lost, you were still the best player in the tournament. Like, if people want to know the best example of this ever, there was a tournament in 2018, DreamHack Marseille, where Astralis, it was the first event they won with the lineup that became the best ever with Magisk, right? And when they won this final, they won it easily, 2-0. And on one of the maps, they won on like Nuke, something mental, like 16-4, right? One of the most dominant wins you can have. In the game, they won 16-4. Simple was on the losing team, and I think had like 24 kills, even though his team won 4 rounds. Like, By the way, that is impossible even in CS. In League, that would be the equivalent, if you don't get it, guys, of like losing a game where you were never ever in the lead and they took every Dragon and every Baron and then you just ended as ADC 1v9ing with like 17 Kai'Sa kills. Like, that would be, they must be just the best player to ever play the game flat out. Like, that just doesn't happen in League. So I already think in League, people do look, and I think the problem is, it's not just that fans naively think whoever wins must be good. It's also become part of the discourse around players, which goes like this. Say everyone knows I'm an Upset fan, right? So if Upset makes the final and the person who doesn't like Upset goes, I hate that, but I guess he did make the final, so I can't say Upset shit. But if Upset comes 10th, it doesn't matter how well Upset plays. It could be on that Origin team years ago. He must be shit, and part of it becomes, now it's important that I admit he is shit. It's not about how did he play or what was his team. It's just about, because of the result, we have to like punish or reward the player based on the results. So I think that is a massive problem. And I'll lastly just say, if you want a great example, an even better one, Keire gave you all the modern ones, because I agree, people are going to act like Ruler had a bad year. It's like, what, if anything, he might even actually in some games have been better, by the way, because he had to be, like in Spring, for example. It's just his team was nowhere near as good. I'll give you an old school example because it's actually from one of Zaboutine's teams. I will defend till the end of time that I do not believe Si-Hassen and Smithy suddenly just turned into morons who couldn't win in League of Legends. Those are two of the most genius Western players ever. Si-Hassen on both levels, he can explain it to you, can think. Smithy might just be the greatest intuition I've ever seen played. I think he's got better intuition than even Jankos at Jungle Mate. His mind for like how to get back into a game, how to path around like a broken game, it's unbelievable. I don't believe because they both played in Immortals and Immortals wasn't good, they were bad players. I don't. I think what happened is it was a terrible team set up. It didn't work for them. Maybe their styles didn't even work. I don't fucking know. But whatever it was, I refuse to believe they just both turned up and went, I've just forgot how to play League of Legends. Guess I suck now. I think that's a great example though, because if you're a fan, and you're just watching from the outside, it would look like they weren't good. You would even watch them go, I mean, you wouldn't even see that. Like, for example, I've told you this before. I remember some of those games where Si-Hassen made what in Fnatic would have been the game-winning play, and he still lost the game because it was in Immortals and you didn't have caps, you didn't have reckless, you know what I mean? Like, so the sad thing is, they were even sometimes doing those plays. Well, if you ask anyone, especially about Si-Hassen, they're going to go, oh, after he left Fnatic, he was just never good again. It's like, bro, these takes kill me inside. They actually just kill me. So, yeah, I agree, essentially. I actually agree overall.
And here's another one, and I'll give you a funny one of where it triggered, because, you know, to have this leg of egoism, you must have been sitting on this for quite a while, right? It was Milky Way that triggered me, okay? Because my... Oh,
I know what you mean. By the end of that split, you mean where they kept saying all the other players were good suddenly? And I was like, what?
No, not that they were good. It was that, like, I was talking to Rich and Nymira about it, and they were saying he's the best player in the world, because look at, like, who he's, like, carrying. And I just said, I was like, I'm fine with you saying he's the best player in the world, right? Okay, but have you actually evaluated him? All I asked was a simple question. What's his weaknesses? What's Milky Way bad at? And then when they realised, because everyone got caught up in the hype train, they'd never actually evaluated like who Milky Way was as a person. Like, I'm like a Night fan, right? Okay, I've like followed him all the way from LDL. As like the joke is, I'm the father of the Night agenda because like I push him being a great player like so much, right? I can tell you all of Knight's weaknesses. I know what he's terrible at. I've watched all these like POVs. I know what he's like really like bad at. Jesus Christ, Ben has to like time his TPs for him. He's that deficient at like timing summoner spells, right? But that doesn't mean like what they call it, I don't know what the good stuff is, but you actually have to evaluate people for who they are, their actual real play, what they could have had an effect on, what they couldn't have an effect on. Because that's where it's funny. Like you've seen that Ruler clip where he does the outplay on Xiaoyu and the base is blown up. It's like, what? Like, he's still amazing.
Yeah.
He's still amazing.
Sure.
It's unbelievable. I can't handle it.
Yes. Right, I've got one more. Maybe this will be the last take. We'll see if Zaboutine has one, he can do one. But I've got one more, because it's another prediction. Are you ready? Spicy prediction. I know we're still miles away from Worlds, but I'm going to do another prediction for you. Oh. So bearing in mind, you all just saw G2 win, and then think back, G2 at MSI. By the way, it could have beaten SKT twice. They almost did, looked awesome. So the world where they come third. I mean, who even knows if they played BLG? That would be interesting, right? Didn't happen. Then they've won all these splits. Here's my prediction. This is spicy. G2 won't get out of the Swiss system. Here's why. Because I think people are forgetting one factor about this G2 team that I think only works in Europe now, which is in Europe, one of the reasons they still won all the splits is because they do have a team where in theory every player is top 3 or 4 at their position. And because of that, it didn't matter what the meta was. They could always find a player that could perform. Look, it was often Cap saving their ass, but even when it wasn't, I saw it, I think it was in the spring finals. I thought Hansama was shit in the spring finals. Didn't matter. That was actually probably the best time for Broken Blade. That was looking awesome. You know what? By the time they got to summer, I thought thought Yike wasn't even playing the meta right. Like, actually, you probably wanted him to default into a stupid Sejuani pick, but he was trying to do his, like, I'm the carry player, though. Haha, it's second year for me. And he was doing weird-ass shit. I also saw, if you go way back, obviously Mickey X had a fucking screamer in spring. He had a time where he was looking like absolute trash, but all he could do is still get that one poppy game with the knock to carry out, win that game, and then you win 3-2 or something. So if you look across the board, the only player I don't think's actually really played bad at any time is probably Caps. And even then, I'll give you one reason for Caps. I thought Caps was just playing what you call like rope-a-dope in America, where you give people like a think they're winning, and then last second you pull the rug out from them. Because what I thought he was doing was, bro, it's Caps. There's no way he doesn't want to play the Zeri that's dominating all the LCK and LPL games. He must just be hiding it because he can win anyway, and he's going to bust it out in the finals. Bro, he wasn't even that good on it. Like, I've been watching Rookie just murder people on that champion. Fucking all the best mid laners. Every time they get the Zeri in the LPL, I'm locked in, because that could be like a 12 kill game. His Zeris were mid as fuck, so I'm just going to put this out there. If I run down the lineup, I think Broken Blade for real's been invisible sometimes, and I think actually last MSI was one of his only good international performances. I think Yike actually showed this year he isn't a guy who can just play every style. In fact, I think he clearly has his own defined style, and it isn't actually always entirely working with the style that they want to play in G2, because I referred to something before, I think G2 is still the classic European mid to bot team. That's how they play. They play to hand Sama, basically. I think they even sometimes actually give up some of Caps' carry strength to get the comp that Hans Sama wants. For Caps, like I said, I don't even know if he's going to play the meta champions. And also, if we go back to that nightmare Faker must-win Worlds meta of Orianna Zay, that isn't what I want in this G2 team for Caps. Like, bro, I want Caps on all the mobile champions that he can make crazy, but I don't want him playing a fucking mid lane as Zay. That's not how I'm going to have G2 at their best. Hans Sama's just been up and down. I think he pretty much at this point in his career has to be like a lane-dominant player and be played to. And then Mickey X, he started in winter awesome. He's looked mad sketchy for most of the year. And he does like those mid-game players that are still cool, seems to have good macro. But man, he can actually just straight up lose lanes. So if you add it all together, add in the randomised element, I have no idea who they're going to draw. I think it's plausible. So I'm going to say G2 will go out in the Swiss system. They will fail to make the top 8. There's my hot take for you.
So here's my one counter to this, okay? And we actually like seen it. Teams that have like the very defined strengths that like they rely on. G2 is one of the best teams at like picking on them. For example, TES want to play through like bot lane. Okay, like they need their like bot lane to like be perfect for that. And G2 identified that, found matchups that they understood better than TES. And I think G2 is a worse team than TES, by the way, right? I think that's shown providence across the time. But because of that, they were reliant on their bot lane. Like they were able to do that. The bot lane of like G2 is a very, very, very potent thing. And it is when it goes badly, you can see how badly it can go like for them, where Hans Sama is actually way more prone to like mid-game errors than like people make out. Like last MSI, he got caught flashless by Yagal. This MSI, he got caught with flash by Faker on the Array, on the Jinx. People make out he's like this very, very consistent, like almost Asian-like or like Korean-like late-game style. He isn't actually. But in the early laning, he's better than some of them. Yeah. He is actually like just categorically better. Him and Mickey X are god tier at finding those like, picks. And so for me, I'm really curious what the meta is going to be at like Worlds, because if it's going to be really bot centric and it's going to be the same way it was when DRX won Worlds and what's his name, Deft and Beryl had all those like weird 2v2 matchups. G2 is the type of team that if they get that, they can like fluke run it, because people have to start banning like Heimers and Nikos and we've got to take out his Poppy, and then Caps and BB are getting like picks that they just should not be getting in the meta. They can flaunt that the same with DRX. They'll probably not win Worlds, but like go like a lot deeper, because going out they did do it last time, and that's why I'm like sitting here like charging. But I thought. I don't know, because that's a very specific meta. Anything else, I think they're weaker on, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I think I kind of like, it's a very, very, very good take, Thorin, because depending on how the patch goes, if nothing moved till Worlds, your take is very valid. The aim of Riot to kind of narrow down the power of marksmen in the mid, narrow down the power of the jungle, carry jungle, and go back more like traditional tank jungles, will shift some power towards the bot side of the map naturally. And if this occurs, I think that G2 should feel comfortable moving into Worlds. But you clearly see that if things don't shift enough, and there's still like this meta where if your jungle is on Sejuani and the opponent is Bren, and Sejuani shows in the first 3 levels, and Bren gets a lead somehow the game is over, you know that G2 cannot play that. You know that if Handsome and Mikix cannot spend the time in bot side getting some pressure for Yike to invade early, or to go back in the mid with Yike and Mikix to enable Caps to play like a moron, because Caps play aggressive like a moron, but he always has his support and his jungle backing him up, then definitely G2 doesn't look good. I think that they are actually on the paper, on this current meta, they're worse than Team Liquid. I think they even look in early game worse than Fnatic. And the only reason they won so many games this year is just because they keep playing side lanes. And I don't know, I feel like nobody in Europe has a good knowledge of like how to like cover your side lanes. And so all teams gather mid as 5. They lose all the tempo on side. G2 wins 1 fight. They teleport on the wave that they pushed previously and they finish the game. But if this doesn't happen and they face any team that has a little bit of discipline, for instance, Team Liquid, I don't see them win with the current parameters. So I would say it is actually an okay take. I think you're probably like a perfect 50-50 like between Heat and Cold.
So here's the thing. One of these teams, it doesn't have to be specifically one of these teams, but these are the types of teams that need to push them out. Because if you look at the top 8, it's kind of already like filled out on Worlds. You have Mad Lions, FlyQuest, 100 Thieves, and then PSG Talon, right? Now, which one, like, if BO3, like, I think PSG is their worst matchup, but I would favour them so much against everyone else. And I think this...
TL can beat them, surely?
TL for sure.
TL can't beat G2 the best of 3. Come on.
No. I'm just thinking, like...
There's one.
Yeah, Ed, put it this way.
Because, by the way, a bigger point I sort of was making here is, this could have been a hot take too. One of the things that did not end up being real about G2 was the fool's gold of this roster for about a year or so was the idea that because they had, I agree, like some of the best players at all the positions, that meant they were like the ultimate team. They could play any style. That's nonsense. As I said, this team clearly is at their best when Hans Sama's really good and they can play through bot lane. If they can't do that, I think this team gets way, way worse. I think that's actually, I agree. I also think Hans Sama is someone who's had a very weird career narrative where people only seem to paint the positive and they don't ever seem to diss him. Remember, he even was the one that was allowed to skate from the rogue failures, etc. Like, somehow people only do his upside. Dude, as you saw, and I think that's what happened in Team Liquid, from talking to people who were in Team Liquid when he was in the team, it sounds like one of the reasons he didn't succeed is because that team, remember, it was a Bjergsen team, and they thought they could do the old school thing in NA of, like, we just scale forever and win because we're better at the end of the game. It's like, dude, that's the opposite of Hans Sama's style of player. Hans Sama's style of player is we are just going to win lane from minute 1 to minute 15, and then we're going to be so fed, I'm going to have my 2 items, we're just going to roam, and then we're going to make fights, and we're going to win because I'm the ADC, I've got all the, like, I think they had the opposite style. So I think in a world where it's either scaling or you're, like here's the point, you could play the broken win, obviously he probably wants you to. I just think that fucks you over if you're Hans Sama. Like, if you have to ask me, which do I want? Do I want Hans Sama weak side, or do I want Broken Blade on a tank? I'll take Broken Blade on a tank no matter what people say. He'll still do something in the team fight. So I think the problem is, I think G2's more defined than people make them out to be, you know. Same with the Yike thing. I think he just had times when he just got covered because they had the better team. But if you really hard force him to, like, only play like fucking Maokai or something, I don't think he's going to have as good a time, mate. I think he's going to suddenly not look as sick a player, you know.
Because here's the thing, the last upset is predicated was obviously because they lost to the NA team, right? Okay, and upset. But I feel like, you know, to do this calculation of if you're to play that matchup over and over, are they more likely than not to win that matchup? I still think they are, like, more likely if you look at, like, the rest of the series. I was put it this way, okay? I would still have them more likely than not to make it out, but I think they're way more better reliant this time. Because I've now thought about it, like, the actual number of, like, metas that really suit them this year is actually, like, a lot less than, like, I was, like, assuming. And the other thing was, and this is, like, quite curious, is, like, now we have all the data on T1, they're not as good a team as, like, that BO5 with what T1 went, like, their run went on to be, is not as good in hindsight as, like, it is on, like, paper. As in, like, I know they went on to win EWEC, but, like, BLG, like, mauled them eventually, and then, like, I know T1 beat them, like, again and the thing, but that's what I'm saying. The BO5 isn't as, like, sexy. And here's the other thing, I don't think G2's learning from losses as well as they used to. Like, I don't even think Dylan's as sharp in the draft like right now, or like because everyone praises Dylan, I do as well because everyone gives him the credit. So like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff like right now actually that's going against G2.
By the way, another reason no one ever bets against G2 as well is this. Because there's a chance, like they're obviously one of the few Western teams that has a very, like, they have an even better chance than TL to also have the crazy ceiling and to go to, like, by the way, they could be in the Worlds Finals. That's what's ridiculous about this take. But my problem is this. I think people have this weird thing in the West, if you're a Western talent, a Western analyst, where you don't want to be the guy who for all time people can go, pull up this clip of them saying you're not going to make it to the playoffs. So what you do is, because you know the ceiling's crazy, you essentially become like a fan, like all those bloody NA casters, and you just go like, I believe it's possible. It is possible. G2 could be in the final, but I'm just saying, I'm actually going to have the balls to say, I think this time they fuck it up and the roster isn't as good as you hope it would be. And also, look, on this one, I probably am relying on them getting a hard draw in Swiss. But by the way, that can happen. I can tell you, as someone who's watched a million CS majors, those Swiss draws are a fucking nightmare. They actually just depress you, mate. Like, you'll just see them already. Every time there'll be one or two where it'll be like, great, Gigabyte Marines has a PCS team. Meanwhile, oh, what's that? Like, G2's playing against Team Liquid. This is fair. Same round, you know, like that can happen, sadly.
But they lose their aura. Like G2 is like T1, where they have an aura in Europe. People are scared to be proactive against like G2. Like people see like G2 inting in front of them, and they're like, "Oh, they're masterminds. They must be doing something. They're cooking. They're cooking." And it's like, no, they're actually idiots. Like, kill them, please, now. And like they then let them just get away with absolute murder. The Asian teams and the other top teams are going to just look at them and be like, why are you doing that? Like, come in and squash the bug. Like,
also remember, bro, there's BO1s here. Like, remember, put it this way, here's what you really aren't even ready for, Europeans. What if in like a BO1, like fucking FlyQuest beats them? Like we're acting like that can't happen in a BO1, bro. In BO1s, they lose in Europe to shit just like Rogue. Like, it can happen. So I don't think people realise. Also, we're all just like looking for the bright side on G2, but there's a darkness under there too. There's a darkness. Is that it? Is that it? Is that the show?
Yeah, I can have a last one.
Yeah, go on. Let's do one. Let's do one more. Go on.
So, by the same standards, the coaching staff of the Splits gets awarded, which is a team that shouldn't be there and has done an upset.
Yes.
For instance, Team Liquid. Should we define the worst coaching staff of the Splits, the coaching staff who had all the talents and didn't make it? My example would be, for instance, Vitality.
It has to be. Yeah, it has to be.
Immense track record of like raising good players, and they even made the exact choice they wanted, which created a micro drama in the French scene because, you know, he was in Carmen Corp and then moved because he has a clause in his contract to go to Vitality. And so they picked the rookie they wanted, and they had the 4 veterans player that they wanted for their long-term plan, and they didn't make it to even out of group stage. And this applies for C9 as well, or Team Liquid in the past. Should we say that C9 was the worst coaching staff of the Splits? Yes or no, right? This is a hot take. The question is a hot take in itself because people might say yes, people might say no. As a coach, I have my personal opinion. But before saying it, I would like to have your opinion on it.
I mean, look, worst is obviously like a fucking mega hyperbole. But put it this way, I think at a minimum, this might sound weird, but I do think every one of those coaching staff, whether they would say it public or not, should to themselves admit I did fail though. I mean, even if I did my best and it wasn't my fault and it was the wrong start, because I'll give you a very brief example. One of the reasons why in Counter-Strike I've been a massive fan and also like friend to the player Carrigan, who's the in-game leader of FaZe Clan, is because once upon a time he got what on paper looked like the craziest super team ever. He had Olaf Meister after he was still pretty good from Fnatic. He had Guardian when he was mega as an AWPer. He had Nico when he was probably the best rifler in the world. And then he had Rain as like his field player who was like one of like the top 10 riflers in the world. And he himself was a great IGL. And he even said to me, this is why I know he's cool and legit as fuck. And by the way, privately, a million players have a million excuses and reasons. Oh, but you don't know, yeah, that guy should be good, but he wasn't practicing. No, he told me straight to my face, if I don't win everything with this lineup, then it's on me because, bro, I have them all. It's like if I had Ronaldo and Messi and, you know, like all at once. And so I do think in a way, even though people don't want to hear it because they want to know, like, well, there's reasons why you could fail. In a way, I think that would actually be a totally legitimate award to have, Zaboutine. You know, the way they have the Oscars, but then they have the Razzies for like the shittest movies. There probably should be like most underwhelming coaching staff of the split. And I'm sorry, all those people who just listed would win it. Yeah, of course. I think I'd be totally legit, right? Because you're right,
Zaboutine-
if that's the logic that we're just inferring why a team is the coaching staff of the split, and as you say, it's never Dylan Falco, it's always going to be like BDS with Striker, or like fucking, I mean, the joke is Coach Carter with fucking Misfits. That's aged very poorly, I'll say right now, by the way, if you saw what he did since this. But that is the angle you, so as we say in English, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If that infers that you're really good, then the other one infers you're really shit as a coach. It's sort of true, I think.
So here's the thing.
Come on, what's your
Zaboutine,
take?
right? Okay, Vitality should get the award, right? Because they actually came out and said that Halisang isn't an Ing and that he's a genius. So they buried their own graves. Like, I've spoken to Mac, like, he's a totally legit guy and all that, but he can't go about saying that and be taken, like, seriously. Like, and I know he's your player, right? Okay. And I know he's your boy, but no, you just don't do it. You just don't talk about it. You don't go and say that Halisang is secretly fucking Megazord. Like,
basically, he could be on this show and his hot take would be, only I understand why what Halisang is doing is genius. That could actually be an episode, okay.
The other 4 people don't understand.
I know,
that's the
exactly.
important part.
It's genius.
And that's your job to make them understand.
I know.
Like, bro, you're telling on yourself. Second of all,
True.
may I just say, the media training department must be great at C9, because guess what? Reaper just doesn't come out and open his mouth. He just says nothing, right?
True.
So if we're going to have an award, the media training department and esports, they get their award. C9, they're great because they just don't come out and say anything. They didn't come out and say anything about like Eminez, for example, and he's crazy. He didn't come out and say anything about like the LF stuff and when that'll blow up. They all just sat back, sun loungers. Oh, we didn't make Worlds, we pina colada. Better luck next time, guys, right? But they both did fuck up, right? Here's the thing, they both fucked up. Worse though, right, is the C9 roster has been like characterized as like a super team. You know what I mean? Now, there is some truth, some non-truth like to that, but this is an example of the fault of like just sticking talent together and then just thinking it's like going to like work in terms of like hands do not make a team.
Yeah.
And that team was permanently plagued.
That's the ultimate hands team, to be fair. It should be amazing. If this is like season 5, that team would probably just win easily, wouldn't they? I know.
Yeah, and TL, who are worse mechanically probably in like every role. Like, I can't say for certain for, like, Impact, because I've not seen enough of his POVs anymore, because he just doesn't do them. They're just way better, yet they are just categorically so much fucking worse. And at the end of the day, the coach, you're supposed to give that identity, and here's the thing, and here's the ultimate killer, and this is the, like, credible thing, they were the worst by year end, when all the coaching is supposed to have come together. Yeah. Like, I can understand them being dog shit at the start of spring, but they never got any better. They're actually worse. How?
Right, here's the thing. That was just him testing the field. What is your take then, Zaboutine?
My take is that I think that we hyper value the outcome, the correlation between the work of the coach and the outcome. And we have proof in both directions, winning and losing. I mean, there's the case of Song in Echo Fox when I was a coach. That was last 10th and then won Worlds with DRX.
Yep.
and then currently you have Reaper, who's one of the most successful coach in NA with previous campaigns that's struggling with one of the biggest stack of talent with Cloud9. And as someone who watched League of Legends esports before the coach era, because coach became standard, I would say around 2014 in the West and started very, very consistent 2015. I mean, there are names that literally came and left in 2015, 2016. So really the era started in 2015. If coaches were like that impactful, there would be a drastic improvement of level. You would see it immediately, right, across the board. I think that we still have to define coaching staff that have a defined impact on their players' playstyle. I would say Striker in BDS seems to be one, because not only Carmine Corp in the LFL, but now his team in the LEC has a defined macro playstyle, and I think that he can not impose, but he can incentivize his player to apply it. But I would say that it is probably, I hate the coaching staff of the split achievements. Because I think it's all a lie and we don't give props to. I think there is plenty of coach and staff that do an amazing job that gets very undermined because they work just with worse players, and there is nothing wrong with working with worse players. If they still improve and learn, that's already something you've done right in your career. But I feel like this is just a good example of, I don't think Reaper, back to your thing with the players, I don't think Reaper became a dog shit coach because he wasn't able to pull. He probably didn't make the right choices or didn't coach well, but I think his value as a coach is still high, despite C9 not making it. And I don't think that Song was the worst coach in the world at Echo Fox because he went Worlds after Worlds. So it's a combination of players and staff, and sometimes it doesn't take well, and players and staff just can't collaborate well. But I feel like I'm more advocating for the removal of praising and awarding staff when we can't even make, as we say, data for players in game. We shouldn't rate what's happening behind the curtain. I think it's kind of a nonsense.
I also will say as well, the mistake that people make when they make that sort of judgment is they act as though the coach is also the GM and got all the players he wanted. You notice that? So every time you get a super team, the assumption is you asked for all those players. I mean, as you yourself will know, just on the episode with Youngbuck did not ask for some of those players on the XL super team. He didn't want some of those players. So as a result, it's kind of fucked up to then turn around and go, well, you didn't want him, but why didn't you win with him? It's like, bro, maybe I didn't even want that style of player or mid laner or jungler or whatever. So I'll just throw this out there. The reason why that award will never be fairly given, as in like appropriately, is because you actually have to know things that have nothing to do with the matches on stage. You have to know all the drama behind the scenes. Because actually, funnily enough, two people I always rave about as a coach were two people who, in theory, failed with Fnatic elite teams. They were Youngbuck and Yamato Cannon. But if you know the story of where the teams began, not necessarily with all the 5 players they wanted at the beginning of a year, and there's like, essentially like the house is on fire and everyone's trying to kill each other within the team and get everyone trained. Sometimes by the end of the year, they're making like finals of LEC and going to Worlds. And if you knew like what they had to do from the beginning where it was on fire to get them to where like, they looked competent and could play any style that won a game, sometimes that is like, I'm like, bro, you might have even outcoached like the guy who won the bloody split. Like if he didn't have these issues, maybe you're an even better coach. But actually history will look at Yamato Cannon and go, you had a super team, bro, and you didn't win a final. So I agree. It's probably the hardest thing in the whole game to evaluate. I mean, it's bad enough we're already trying to evaluate like shot callers without the comms. How the fuck are we evaluating what the coach does? Like, because actually, to bring it back to the beginning of the episode, I think half of it's just on the bloody draft. And they still to this day also talk about the draft as though we can all pick the same things. Like, this is like if we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I have all the sick cards and you have all the shit cards. How are you ever supposed to draft and beat me? Like, you won't, will you? So, no, I agree. The coach was always the hardest one. Sure.
I usually take this time to remind everyone that Crescent of TES was one of the worst coaches and one of the worst coaches of all time. Lost night 3, LPL finals, and maybe one of the worst.
You would think he actually wanted. You would think he actually came in a time machine. Right. The problem is, it's like Terminator. Knight actually was just going to already 3 years ago dominate all of League of Legends and win every tournament. So they had to send Crescent back from the future to draft to sabotage Knight in every regional and Worlds he ever attended. Like, it's actually almost inexplicable. That's a more plausible narrative than what actually happened, which is the idea they were all trying to draft the best shit and win the game. You know what I mean? Like,